Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner and technical director of AOC Key Solutions and the host of this program. Today we examine professionalism in the procurement workforce, both in government and private sectors. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the statistics about the massive brain drain due to the aging workforce at federal agencies. And I'm equally sure that you sympathize as their new and understandably less experienced replacements struggle to meet the increasing workload. Likewise, anyone who has worked in the private sector can vouch for the increasing difficulty experienced in hiring their own top-notch contract managers, both public and private. At the end of the day, it always comes down to people and their knowledge, dedication, and frankly, their professionalism. So joining me today to probe these critical issues are Steve Schooner, Professor of Government Contract Law at George Washington University and a member of the NCMA Board of Advisors. Good morning, Steve.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And also we have Melissa Starinsky, who is the Chancellor of the Veteran Affairs Acquisition Academy. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
And last but not least, we have Rear Admiral U.S. Navy, retired Len Vincent. Len, you are the industry chair at the Defense Acquisition University. You are the NCMA past national president, and you are a member of its board of advisors. Good morning, Len.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, man. Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So we've got a lot to cover, so let's get right to it, okay? So my first question is there a problem? Is there a challenge? Is there an opportunity with respect to professionalism in the workforce? Steve, what do you think?
So the problem is extremely well established at this point, and unfortunately we're talking about a problem that was built over a couple of decades. The most significant problem by itself is that the United States government does not have enough skilled professionals to do the kind of purchasing they need to do every day. So the first problem is a volume problem. The second problem, though, which is related to that, and that's where the opportunity is so incredibly important to discuss, is that it's not just that we don't have enough people, but a lot of the people that we have were never trained to do the type of buying that we have, and as a general rule, the United States government is not terribly good at training the people for the kind of work they need to do, and unfortunately, we neither have the resources nor the time to do the kind of training and give them the opportunity for the experiential learning they need to do to be the kind of effective business managers we need for the government to get good value for money.
Good. Melissa, what's your take? Opportunity, challenge? What do you think?
I see it as an opportunity, and we're very fortunate at the Department of Veterans Affairs that our senior leadership all the way to the top with Secretary Shinseki has recognized the importance of the acquisition function to the mission of the VA. And so about 5 years ago, we made a significant investment in training and developing our acquisition workforce by establishing the VA Acquisition Academy in Frederick, Maryland. And so, as Steve mentioned, part of the problem or challenge is a numbers problem, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that when we get the people that we bring into the workforce, that we are training and developing them in the right way. And so we're doing a lot of really exciting things and that we're seeing tremendous results with at the VA, and happy to share with those with you today.
But Jim, I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity, really. And the challenge is it's not only numbers, but it's getting those numbers in the right positions, not only educated and trained, but also qualified. Which we can get into that a little more, but I think there's a matter of once you go through this education training program that I'll take the Department of Defense as well as the other part of the government agencies, are they really qualified to do that job, and who determines that?
Right.
So I think there's numbers
and skills
and skill sets.
There's an aspect of both.
And also, I think part of the challenge is, can we, in today's budget environment, can we keep that funding in the right places for that right type of training?
And there's actually a tale of 2 or 3 cities going on, and you've already heard the entree to it. The Veterans Administration, or the Department of Veterans Affairs, has distinguished themselves, as Melissa mentioned, in the last few years. They're much better funded in terms of addressing this problem. They have a brick and mortar facility in Frederick where they're doing state-of-the-art training and professional development. So they're actually in a class by themselves, and that's very important. Len also mentioned the Department of Defense, which historically had the best procurement training, and many civilian agencies have consistently expected DoD to train them, and then they grab them mid-career. Right. But the key thing is there's a lot of other civilian agencies out there that don't have the kind of money or the vision that the VA has, and they don't have the kind of rubric that the Defense Department has had for a number of years. And the Defense Department, which has typically been the leader, has acknowledged they don't have enough people and they don't have enough money to get the job done. Think about how difficult it is for all of the other civilian agencies that aren't in the position the VA is in.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, Melissa, that it goes along this point, but is the acquisition community getting a bum rap for problems that might be occurring in various procurements throughout the government? Is it a bum rap or not?
I would say yes, they are. And I think we have an incredibly talented, committed workforce. And before we started the show here this morning, we were talking in the green room and talking about I see a trend where we continue to beat up the acquisition workforce. And not necessarily addressing the ecosystem of the acquisition system. So it's both of those things. It's really looking at how are we running our business. And I've seen a trend where we're blaming the acquisition workforce for the inability to get the job done, but it's much bigger than just the workforce.
It's just bigger than just that.
Yes.
So Len, let me ask you, I mean, there's some symptoms that come to mind, let's say RFP delays or patchworked RFPs or slow processes to make decisions, or maybe a lack of communication, maybe an increase in protests. Is the professionalism of the workforce at stake here? Are they part of the problem here, or do you reckon they're part of the solution?
Well, I think they're both part of the problem to some degree. You can say it's a large degree or small degree, but there's some degree, but also they're not the total part of the problem. I mean, as Melissa said, there's an ecosystem or an environment out here that they work in. As soon as you say acquisition of contracts, a lot of the times the people that would throw rocks would throw it right back at those people that are actually doing the contract work. But that ecosystem includes lots of other parts. A lot of them are moving parts. People have to have the requirements that develop the requirement. Funding, part of that. Right. Comes into these people that we call contracting officers or procurement officers, to put all of this together and then ask industry to respond to those particular requirements.
I understand.
There's time associated with that as well as complexity.
It takes time, it's complex, it involves skills, it involves numbers, it's all those things that you're talking about. Okay, we're going to pause for a brief commercial message here, and when we come back, we're going to continue this discussion. Thank you.
Working in contract management is a complex job. Creating, executing, managing contracts. It's an ever-changing world, and our members share the same challenges. At the National Contract Management Association, we know this business, gathering the best minds in our field, furthering your career by providing knowledge and training. Together, we've figured it out.
So, did we win that government contract?
We did. And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
Good morning, my name is Alan Horlick and I'm the executive producer of Government Contracting Weekly, which is currently in its second year on television. Now, as we move into a new year, I want to share with you some exciting news, and that is our decision to begin producing and airing commercial messages. This unique program attracts a pure concentration of both industry and government decision makers. As an advertiser, you can't afford to waste your money. So whether you are a contractor or a service provider, Government Contracting Weekly offers you the perfect environment and the perfect audience so you can make your own best pitch on why you should be hired. If you'd like to learn more about advertising in Government Contracting Weekly, you can contact us at governmentcontractingweekly.com and click on Advertise.
Steve, I want to ask you a question that's sort of a follow-up from where we were, but in your view, what is the root cause of the problem or the challenge or the opportunity, however you want to characterize it?
Well, as everyone knows, the United States government today just doesn't have enough money to meet all of its needs. And there's a lot of folks, particularly on the Hill, that are looking at the acquisition workforce, and they think that if we could just buy smarter or buy better, it'll save our budget problems. Well, it's just not true. Basically, the United States government has to decide what it doesn't want to buy. So we can make incremental improvements, and as you'll hear from my colleagues here, the government may be able to get a little bit better value for money, they may get things a little bit more quickly, the contracts may be managed a little bit better. But we're talking about marginal improvements. It's changing the appetite. That's what's really going to change the budget situation for the government.
That's very good. Okay, so Len, when you were talking, you had mentioned about this, maybe it was a combination of skills and a combination of numbers and head count and so on, like that. But the question I would have for you is, there's a lot of talk about government acquisition personnel having standards and accreditation and all that, but the dialogue for the private sector is not quite so robust. What's your reaction to that? Your comment, please.
Well, it isn't as robust. And I mean, there's thousands of different companies and vendors out there that have individual procurement expertise and requirements. Some of those actually came from government to work there.
Right.
And my experience, industry loves those people. They are very well trained coming out of government, whether it's DOD or the civilian agency.
Very attractive.
So while they don't have standards, if you're supporting the government for the government's requirements, they learn how the government does its business and actually mirrors in large part its own training. In fact, we at Defense Acquisition University, and part of my responsibility is to bring some of those industry people in as students into the various classes that are offered there.
Okay, so let me follow that up with a question to Steve, and that is, okay, there is no common accreditation process or procedure in the private sector, and yet lawyers have them, doctors have them, accountants have them, but when it comes to contract management or the procurement personnel in the private sector, there isn't any. Why? Why is that? Why
So first, just to follow up on the point Len made, because I think this is very important. The metrics suggest that the private sector is spending more money on staffing and training the staff they have in the acquisition function. So that's one disconnect. But I think that the question you ask is a little bit more complicated. Going back now more than a decade, the Department of Defense came up with some statutory minimum standards for acquisition professionals, and a number of years later, the civilian agencies, through another act of Congress, basically had a catch-up statute. So we have what we call the DAWIA, the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act, and then with the Clinger-Cohen Act, the civilian agencies caught up. But the problem that you have is, even with qualifications for attorneys and qualifications for accountants, that's minimum standards. I don't think that the problem that we have today in acquisition is minimum standards. The people who you see coming into the acquisition workforce today are college educated, they've gone through the basic requirements. But I think what you'll hear from Melissa is the real challenge today is not only giving them all the basic training that Len talked about, how does the federal acquisition regulation work, how do all these contract mechanisms work, but they need the experience. It's literally having the opportunity to learn from mistakes.
Okay, so let's ask Melissa about that. Large businesses, maybe they have their own contract management shop, their own standards, okay? Small businesses tend to rely on the outside, they outsource it, right? Maybe they ignore it totally. Is it time for a national accreditation body in this field here? Is it time?
I'm not sure it's time for a national accreditation body, but I agree that there is a set of minimum standards that we all ought to be adhering to. And as Steve said, I think we've done a great job within government in terms of bringing people in that are well educated, that can do the job, giving them the technical skills training that they need to do the job. But we're taking it a step further than that and really providing career development opportunities for the workforce to learn how to run and manage the acquisition business better. I think our efforts to date all across government, and although we established the Academy 5 years ago and we've been moving in this direction, I think we have a real opportunity to really rethink how we're training and developing our workforce and focusing on that career development in terms of what it takes to run the acquisition business more efficiently, more effectively.
You wear two hats, sort of. I know you're here today representing yourself, but you're also with the Defense Acquisition University, and you're on the Board of Advisors for NCMA. I know that DAU has its own set of standards that it promulgates, but do you think that the NCMA could play a role here, and if so, what role in this whole process?
Well, I think there is a role, and I think there's a role for NCMA, the Defense Acquisition University under its Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act requirements. And I think with the Federal Acquisition Institute, which the Veterans Affairs is also a part of that, who has its own standards and competencies. So if you look at each of those individual bodies of knowledge, there's a lot of overlap and sameness, if you will. Yeah. So I think there's a chance to have more discussion about where are the similarities. DAWIA itself and the competencies are about 41 or 40 plus. I think the Federal Acquisition Institute probably have about 40-ish, if you will. I think there's about the same number of competencies in the contract management, the body of knowledge that NCMA holds. So there's a lot of similarities, and I think we could probably do more to look at that. Whether we need a national standard or not, we could discuss.
And when we come back from commercial, we're going to talk about the need for a national standard if there is one. So we'll break now.
Excellent.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you'll reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
Federal Acquisition and Program offices are working every day to defend and secure the United States. Hello, I'm Brian Null, President of Blue Water Federal Solutions. We are a growing small business possessing the experience and capabilities found in the largest federal contractors. Since 2005, we've earned a significant number of contracts and task orders across DoD, DHS, and civilian agencies, with major contracts including DHS Eagle, Eagle II, and GSA Alliance Small Business. Our success is achieved through the high-performance teams that are providing disciplined service delivery on complex technical solutions, meeting cost and schedule with exceptional customer feedback and official CPAR ratings. To learn how we can deliver exceptional results on your mission requirements, go to bluewaterfederal.com and click on Contact Us. Blue Water Federal, solutions, integrity, results.
Here at Key Solutions, we've been working for more than 30 years to help government contractors win and retain contracts in excess of $130 billion. Now, we've worked with 87 out of the top 100 government contractors and hundreds of small companies as well. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions, and we want to help you win or retain your next contract. Contact us at AOC Key Solutions and click on Win. Steve, I want to come back to what Len was talking about before the break, and maybe you want to follow up on a point about the SIMBOC and so on. Why don't you go ahead?
Right, so the National Contract Management Association, which is a leading professional organization in our field, actually has two important roles here. First, as Len mentioned, they have a contract management body of knowledge, which they're constantly upgrading, which integrates the DoD body of knowledge, which we get from DAU, and the Federal Acquisition Institute's approach. So we're trying to get some amount of standardization in the field. But the other that you mentioned is NCMA does act as a certifying body. So for example, I'm a certified professional contract manager. I sat for the exam many years ago, and NCMA is trying to upgrade its efforts in that regard too. But for a lot of folks in the private sector, they seek certification from NCMA if they don't have the DoD or the civilian certification, or if they already have it.
Right, okay. Well, it's good to clarify that for our audience. So in the remaining time, folks, what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about the path forward. the recommendation, what to do now. Okay, I think you just kind of touched on it, Steve, but let's throw it open for your discussion. Melissa, what should we do?
Right, and I've already said this, I think we really need to rethink how we're developing our workforce, and so I think while this common set of core competencies that we ought to adhere to for the entire community, I think we need to go beyond that as well and define the competencies that are needed, as I said before, to run the acquisition business more efficiently, more effectively. And that's what we're doing at the VA Acquisition Academy, and we'd love to see other agencies following suit with that.
Yeah, so your association, I mean, your organization really is taking a leading role in this, and you have a very precise vision of where you think it ought to go.
It's a really good model.
Right, and we actually have multiple models that we've got in play, and we're seeing tremendous results. We're seeing significant dollar savings, acquisition savings as a result of having a well-trained acquisition workforce, including that strong program management capability. So we're seeing great results, and we're continuing to build on the models that we have to improve.
Okay, so Len, you're third. Maybe they've taken your thunder, I don't know, but what would be your recommendation?
They'll never take my thunder.
Yeah.
But what I would say, there are a lot of requirements, a lot of competencies that's required for our acquisition workforce. But what I've learned over time that one competency doesn't fit every situation. So as people either grow in their jobs or grow into different jobs, there are different competencies required. I think what Melissa is coming from is you want to make sure that you're training the right competencies for the right job.
Right.
The other thing I would say is, just because we talked about certification from the National Contract Management Association, from the DAWIA requirement, certification doesn't necessarily mean that you're qualified. I can come out and get an education or maybe even an MBA, and I may or may not be qualified to do the job that I might be expected to do. So I think what we've got to do is go from the certification to the qualification aspect and ensure that people are really qualified to do their job. And in the DoD's case, as well as FAI, that training organization is really not the one that actually determines whether they're qualified. They can talk about they've done the work to become eligible for certification. Somebody has to determine whether they're really qualified to do that job.
So your point is that certification is a necessary but not sufficient condition for, okay.
Experiential learning is a key thing. I think that's something VA's done a great job on. You got to learn, not just in the classroom. You got to do it.
All right, well, we're going to take a minute for another break, and when we come back, we're going to get some final thoughts from you all, okay?
Awesome.
Thank you.
In this hyper-competitive marketplace, as a federal government contractor, now more than ever, you need to identify, track, forecast, and analyze opportunities that will help you grow your company by better positioning yourself to win contracts. I'm Jamie Brett, the founder of Easy GovOps, and that's our mission. Utilizing the most intuitive market intelligence platform, Easy GovOps, enables contractors of all sizes to manage their pipeline, collaborate, and team like never before. Experience for yourself the power available to you and your team with a 5-day free trial period with no commitment necessary to begin. Simply visit easygovops.com to start your free trial today. Join the hundreds of other federal government contractors who are enjoying the ultimate competitive advantage of our unequaled market intelligence. Just spend one free week at easygovops.com and see for yourself.
The U.S. government is the world's largest customer, buying more than $3 trillion a year in goods and services, including more than $500 billion in contracts with foreign companies. To attract more foreign interest, we have developed the Forum, which is geared to embassy representatives, trade missions, and foreign companies seeking to win U.S. federal contracts. The Forum will provide a practical overview on how to effectively navigate the regulations and protocols in the federal marketplace. The Forum, titled Demystifying the U.S. Government Marketplace, will be held on March 19th at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in Washington, D.C. The speakers and panelists will include foreign trade representatives, foreign company representatives, and professionals in federal contracting. To learn more, go to aockeysolutions.com and click on KSI Buzz for events.
Okay, in the time remaining, I just want to do a little trick that we use, we call it the one thing. And this is, if you could only give one or two things, we'll allow that, of advice that you knew with absolute certainty would be followed, what would your advice be as we proceed?
Well, I would say with the contract dollars that we have at play here, $400 billion plus a year across the entire federal government, that agencies cannot afford to be penny wise and pound foolish. So I think really important to make sure that you're making the right investments in training and developing the acquisition workforce.
It starts there. Okay,
Absolutely.
Len, yours.
Well, I would think we do a pretty good job of training vertically in all the various functions that's required in the acquisition workforce. But we expect when they go back in their workplace that they work horizontally. So I think that we ought to do more and better training of how to work horizontally across this continuum of the acquisition process.
Okay, Steve, your one or two things.
Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward. First and foremost, I think the government needs to focus less on rules and more on outcomes. That's the way consumers think. And the second, how do consumers think? What do they care about when they buy? They're looking for customer satisfaction. We need to rethink our metrics or our performance measures to focus on customer satisfaction rather than the rules going into the procurement process.
Okay, well, today's show sort of impacts every single contractor in the country, so I hope they learned something from you. As I said earlier, it always comes down to people, and going forward, the critical work performed in the GovCon space cannot be successful if we fail to bring to bear a highly trained, motivated, and completely professional workforce, both in government and in industry. This naturally leads to a discussion of the need for commonly accepted professional standards and accreditation, and we hope today's discussion has advanced the dialogue and furthered the thought process surrounding this critical issue. To the extent that we have been successful in this regard, the credit goes to our outstanding guests. So I'd like to thank, first of all, Len Vincent, the Rear Admiral retired for U.S. Navy, who is the industry chair at the Defense Acquisition University and the NCMA past national president. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Next we have Melissa Starinsky, the chancellor of the Veterans Affairs Acquisition Academy. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I
Likewise.
hope our audience did as well. And last but not least, Steve Schooner, a professor of government contract law at George Washington University and a member of the Board of Advisors of NCMA. Thank you, all three of you. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Okay, but most importantly, I want to thank you, the viewers, for once again making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. On behalf of all my colleagues at AOC Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and we'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.